Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have a timely and very important show for you this evening. Former AOPA President and CEO Darren Pleasance is here. And as you can imagine, we have a lot to talk about. And before we get started, in the spirit of Darren's dedication to general aviation, I would like to encourage all of you to find every way possible to get out there and fly, to continue your learning, even during the winter months if you're in the northern latitudes here and like I am, and there's a bunch of snow on the ground here. And just to know that everything is available free to you here at SocialFlight.com. That is our website, as well as the free SocialFlight mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. We have tens of thousands of aviation events, destinations, cool places to fly. We have our Fly to Win challenge, where we're about to give away on a Lightspeed Delta Zulu headset. Just need to go and get the app and check in at your local airport to win. And we have our FAA courses section, where you can peruse all sorts of courses, take it on your own time for FAA wings credit, as well as in, if you're a mechanic, we've got aviation maintenance technician courses, and also we've got our IA renewal courses there if you're an A&P mechanic with inspection authorization. It's all free. It's all within SocialFlight, so please go check that out. Tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Avidyne and the amazing IFD 550, 540, and 440 series of navigators, and the new Avidyne Vantage system that's literally going to revolutionize the panels of Cirrus aircraft. We have an IFD 550 and 440 in our Bonanza here at SocialFlight. We're also putting an IFD 550 with a camera system in that Mustang you see here behind me, so that we'll have a really cool taxi camera, and there's videos about that. So thanks to Avidyne and so many of the other folks that are here on the board for making SocialFlight free to all of you and helping keep all of this going. Now to tonight's program. As most of you are aware, on February 4th, 2026, AOPA announced their decision to replace Darren Pleasance as the organization's CEO and president after only 1 year in the position. This decision shocked the membership in the industry because in a relatively short period of time, Darren had made a significant impact on connecting with pilots everywhere and becoming a strong advocate for the general aviation community. Darren Pleasance was the 6th CEO of AOPA over the past 85 years, and his story echoes that of many in the aviation community, going from model planes to being a ramp rat at the local airport, doing anything possible to scrape money together for flying lessons. He soloed at 16, he got his private at 17, his commercial instrument and CFI at 18, while also going to college for his degree in mechanical engineering. Darren served on the board of the EAA as well for the Experimental Aviation Association for the past 14 years and remained highly active in aviation in every way possible. Darren flies a Sea Ray, an RV6, a Piper Meridian, a T6, a Texan, North American P-51, our old dream plane, of course. And he also recently published a book that I'll show you here that I strongly recommend here, True North, a handbook for inspired living, and I really recommend that folks go and grab this. It's really a wonderful book. Well, tonight we're going to talk with Darren about the state of general aviation when he began his short tenure at AOPA, what he learned and accomplished over the past year, as well as his thoughts on the future of general aviation and the organizations that support it. Please understand that for legal and other reasons, we're not going to be addressing AOPA directly or the AOPA Board of Directors or details about any external efforts underway to affect change in the organization. But we are going to do everything we can really within those constraints to bring you his vision, to tell you a little bit about kind of what happened and what we are hoping for moving forward. And so with that, I am so thrilled to call him a close friend and have him with us here tonight. Please welcome to SocialFlight Live, AOPA past president and CEO, Darren Pleasance. How are you doing, Darren?
I'm great, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I sincerely wish that we had you here on slightly different circumstances, because I know you and I were very much looking forward to talking here on the show about a kind of a year in review and a year looking forward in the role. But I'm really thrilled that you've taken the time to join us regardless.
I wouldn't miss it. You were one of the first people or individuals I spoke to when I took the role, so I enjoyed that. That was roughly a year ago, and so yeah, I was happy to do this.
Well, I have to say something from my perspective. I've been in this industry, as many people have, for decades, and with that, have seen changes in organizations out there. Changes, of course, in AOPA, different presidents, different things like that. And when you first joined AOPA and we connected, I felt like it was such a wonderful opportunity. You're just so passionate and didn't carry any airs about you. This wasn't I'm president or something like that. I've never met anyone in a role as kind of high and influential as you are that is just so down to earth and connected to the average pilot. I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. I love aviation, and this was the opportunity of a lifetime to step into AOPA, and I've been a member for 38 years, I guess now, since I was a kid. So yeah, it was nice to have the platform to try to bring the amazing opportunities that aviation presents to as many people as I could.
So level set us a little bit. I'd like to get a better sense of how you came to serve as president and CEO. What was the situation at the time, first of all, for you and being asked to join? And then I'd like to dive down a little bit on what the situation really was for the organization.
Sure. I've been in high tech for a long time. Aviation was a part of my life, pretty much my entire life, as you described, starting at an early age, and flew for a living till I was 30, but then it migrated for a variety of reasons, which perhaps we'll get into on this conversation, but migrated into where business was how I kind of made my living, between management consulting and then Google for quite a few years, and then over to Cisco. But I'd always kept my footprint in aviation. I flew an airplane to work after moving to Oregon many years ago. I continued to do backcountry flying and some of the warbird stuff that you mentioned. And so along that way, I joined the EAA board probably 14 years ago, I guess now. And through that, I'd gotten to know Mark Baker and gotten to know AOPA a bit more from a leadership perspective. And so when Mark had decided it was time to step down after 10 or 11 years or so, he reached out to me as one of the individuals that might be an interesting candidate for the role. And I hadn't been thinking about it at the time, but it struck me as, what a great opportunity to take my love of aviation and all the business experience I'd had in so many different types of businesses, from very large global companies to very small companies. Back when I used to work at a company called SoCal Jets, way back when in Santa Barbara. And so all of that came together and just said, wow, what a great opportunity to take all of that and give back and join an organization like AOPA and try to help it, be the best organization it could be.
I have to interject. I absolutely love your connection, kind of growing up in aviation, and you and I were just recently together out in LA at the Living Legends of Aviation event, and I have to say, seeing you meet John Travolta there and get a picture from him. I mean, you used to fly him, right? But
yeah, that was surprising and fun, and there were some folks in the industry that helped make that happen. But yeah, I was probably 22 or so back in Santa Barbara, and he needed a right seat guy in his Hawker jet, and I happened to be, as often happens, right place at the right time. And he was filming a movie, Look Who's Talking, out in New York, and needed red-eye flights mostly back and forth. And so I sat in the right seat and got to talk on the radio and raise the gear and flaps and do all the stuff that a right seater does, and have John Travolta serve dinner to the other pilot and myself somewhere over Salina, Kansas, or wherever we were at that time of night. And so yeah, it was great. And one of his handlers knew I was in the audience and brought me back behind stage to reconnect. I hadn't seen him since I was 22, so it had been 30 plus years, 30 something years before since I'd last seen him. So yeah, that was a neat full circle moment for me just a couple weeks ago.
Well, I have to tell you, you looked at 22 years old going back there and meeting him.
It was really cool, and he was very gracious, as he was back then, right? John was and still is, I think, a very nice guy, loves aviation. It's obviously been a big part of his life, and he's done well in the movie business, but also I think at the core of who he is, aviation's a big part of what defines him. And so yeah, it was neat to see that, and to see how much he remembered of those days and how gracious he was in sort of reconnecting with me. So yeah, I really appreciated it.
He's such a wonderful individual. In fact, I was just talking with Colonel Eileen Collins, the first female shuttle astronaut who's coming on the show next week. And she also remarked that he is just so genuine and sweet. So what I'd like to do next is kind of understand a little bit, though, about what kind of you were walking into, because general aviation's got a lot of challenges, and with that, I think organizations like AOPA really do as well. So I can't imagine that it was like, hey, everything's just going gangbusters and we just need someone else to give credit to. There's got to have been some real challenges that you're walking into.
Yeah, I think it's AOPA has been around for 87 now, going on 88 years, and it has become, I think, the largest and I think most influential aviation organization in the world, especially as relates to general aviation. But despite that, it also has in a sense had the realities of an evolving aviation ecosystem, in particular an aging population. And the other associations, by the way, have the same challenges. So that's not unique to AOPA, but an aging membership group and a younger set of pilots coming into the industry that that communicate in an inherently different manner, e.g., more social as you're doing, and more digital, versus call it more traditional membership members who where the magazine was kind of the primary way that people engaged with organizations like AOPA. And so there were opportunities that AOPA needed to lean into to better connect with that younger group of pilots. And it was also the case that people have just changed. So there's so many other distractions, and so people aren't running around airports like I did when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. There's fences around airports, so it's harder to get connected. There's more distractions and other things to do. Aviation's gotten more expensive, so it's harder to get into it. So I'd say there's just some foundational challenges out there that that AOPA was navigating, but that was a big part of of what I stepped into. And also on the safety front, right? There's ASI, the Air Safety Institute that AOPA has, is an amazing organization, does really good work, and leads the General Aviation Joint Safety Committee, GAJSC, in partnership with EAA and with the FAA. And that's a really important group that tries to understand what are the key drivers of accidents, and then team up to come up with an agenda to shape that. But the world has changed for that organization too, right? You've got really credible, good people out there on YouTube and other platforms talking about safety, giving accident analyses, and many of them are quite good and thoughtful. And so it raises the question, how does ASI continue to add value, right, and complement what else is already out there? And so on. There's a lot of stuff we'll get into, I'm sure, around the regulatory environment, shift to unleaded fuel, basic med, and so on. So there was a whole host of, I call it challenges. And the organization coming out of COVID had gone through a bunch of layoffs and those other challenges that many companies did, and a return to office, and so that that's what I walked into, but also a huge level of enthusiasm, and the team's amazing. I mean, really committed, thoughtful people who love aviation as much as I do, and so it wasn't a disaster by any means. It was an organization that wanted to make a difference and had a set of challenges that they were taking on.
Yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but so first of all, people I think need to understand that the Air Safety, is it the Air Safety Foundation or ASI?
Institute. Yeah, ASI,
Institute.
Air Safety
ASI
Institute.
is kind of a little bit, how would you describe it? Separate or separately funded underneath AOPA?
It is, yeah. It's its own standalone legal entity within AOPA, and it's largely funded by donor dollars because it's essentially a public good. It exists to help aviation at large be safer, and so that's its mission, and it's to use the full breadth of resources it's got to help educate and inform and motivate people to make decisions that result in improvements in aviation safety.
And so that organization that is kind of, as you mentioned, funded by donations and does some incredible work of putting together a look back on safety, of coming out with videos and other programs that really focus on safety. That leaves the rest of AOPA with strong focus on legislative advocacy, right? Essentially lobbying and for change, whether it be fuels or legislative change, things like Mosaic, medical rights and things like that are very important to the industry. And then that is funded by dues and essentially the magazine and things like that. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah, it's accurate. It's primarily funded by member dues. The advertising, as you said, that's another example of where it's challenged. As we all know, I came out of Google after many years, and I was on the ad side of Google, and a lot of advertisers have shifted to digital, and so that's an area that AOPA is evolving, and they're making progress. But that was another example of a challenged area where historically it was, selling ad space in the magazine, and that still contributes to AOPA's economics, but they're having to make changes as well in how they reach advertisers, how they help advertisers reach their consumers or their potential customers. And so that's just, again, another good example of part of the evolution that AOPA is going through.
So you've got a challenge that you're walking into that has to do with the changes in media, which has to do with revenue that's coming in. I think we have to be honest that you've got a reduction in membership when you look at the peak over a long period of time that's happened in that, and yet you have these great services that are so important to the industry of representing the industry legally and doing these things. And it seems to me that if we do like a 10-year look back or further, maybe I'm showing the grays in my hair, but go a lot further. Like there've been all different types of things tried with AOPA hosting big, large, huge events, and instead of just regional fly-ins, with different directions that it's taken. Tell me about your approach over the past 12 months to walking into that situation and essentially turning it around or moving it forward.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is there was a ton of great stuff to build on. As you mentioned, AOPA had tried a lot of different formulas with their expos and, Palm Springs, the airplanes taxiing down the road years ago.
I remember that parade of planes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Parade of planes. And I think it done a really good job. Not surprising. Those are very expensive. And the organization had really tried not to have to raise dues, and it's still, in my view at least, shockingly inexpensive, $89 a year. So essentially, less than $9 a month. And that's pretty darn inexpensive for an organization that gets up every day to try to help aviation thrive and help people get into it. So, but what they found, of course, was that was expensive, and all the marketing and everything goes along with those events. And they started looking at alternative ways of connecting with members and potential members in forums where someone else was taking the lead to create it. So Buckeye, for example, just happened recently out in Arizona, and that's a perfect example where you've got a mayor who's, I'd say, enlightened, an enlightened mayor who cares deeply about aviation and has built a master plan that thinks thoughtfully around the airport and how development will occur over the coming decades, with an eye towards protecting that airport and making sure that it remains viable and mitigate as much as possible the noise and all the other complaints that tend to come as communities encroach. And so rather than AOPA taking on an entire event on its own, the idea, and this is before my time, I give this credit to Mark Baker and the team, thought about what if we, rather than create an event, what if AOPA were to turbocharge an event? Let somebody else figure out how many porta potties and food trucks you need to have, and let AOPA do the marketing to drive as many people into the event as possible, and then bring all the content and education into that event to make it a better event than it would have been on its own. And that really has proven to work incredibly well at places like Buckeye. And so now there's a continuation, like, hey, that doesn't cost nearly as much, and it's a win-win for the organizer of the event and AOPA. Are there other places around the country where that could be done? And then, of course, taking advantage of the Sun and Funds of the world and the Air Ventures up in Oshkosh to really show up in force and provide a great experience for the members and potential members who want to come by and engage with AOPA.
I think it's interesting you're referring to those in terms of cost, and clearly for something like AirVenture is a huge revenue source, if not the major revenue source for EAA. You've got events like Sun and Fun. I always thought when AOPA was pushing for Palm Springs or for these big events that they were looking at that as a revenue, as an idea to have a third big event and be a revenue source, not necessarily a cost.
I think it was back then, because if you think about it too, the world has changed. That would have been a place back then where it probably would have been King rather than Garmin. Garmin is obviously, and then Avidyne and others, right, who've become sort of the digital powerhouses out there.
Let's be nice. I used to be there.
There you go, right? And the reality is, those were places where the vendors would show up, and all of these, manufacturers of aircraft and of avionics and engines and all that. That was how they got their products in front of pilots and enthusiasts. And at that time, AirVenture also was not as big as it has become, and so that was a real way to so it was a revenue generator, because you had all of the Hartzells and the Lycomings and Continentals and others paying to be there, in addition to other folks who participated. So that model has changed as well, right? You can learn so much online today that you before used to have to go to a show like that and learn in person. And so again, the the world has moved on, and AOPA has, been trying to catch up. And I think, to your earlier question, that was a big part of the agenda this year, was how do we make sure that AOPA remains relevant and compelling to the core member that is there today, which are on the older side of that spectrum, of the age spectrum, while also evolving the value proposition, involving the services, the offerings that AOPA has to be equally relevant to the young folks who are coming into aviation. And the good news is there's no shortage of them. The aviation population, the pilot population is growing. So we're not in a world where there's a shrinking pie and we're all scrambling to get our share of it. This is one where, fortunately, I think in large part because of the pilot shortage that's been broadcast for probably a decade now about the looming airline pilot shortage, more young kids know about at least the airline opportunities. And then companies like ATP, and then of course the big universities, UND and Embry-Riddle and others, have put in place major programs to drive young people primarily on the airline route. And so that's resulted in a lot of people coming in, over 60,000 student pilot certificates last year, over 30,000 private pilot certificates last year. And that's up from like 17,000 private pilot certificates just a decade ago. So, it's a vibrant industry. The challenge was AOPA was really optimized for that magazine reading older individual. And it's not rocket science. And what really has to happen is they need to shift and this is what we were doing, is shift what we offer to things that younger folks would care about who are trying to build a life in aviation, and then communicate with them, deliver that through digital means as opposed to through the physical magazine. And then, unfortunately, AOPA needs to do both. Right? They can't shut down the magazine and ignore the core member, but you gotta shift to how you reach those younger folks and provide them something they care about. And so that really is and has been, the major focus over the past year, and I think will continue to be the focus as AOPA goes forward.
Well, I mean, of course, through our friendship, I'm amazed at how the travel you do and the work that you've been doing in that. It's crazy. And to dispel any misinformation that's out there, you got a house in Frederick. You were balancing being out there at the office when you need to be at the office, and then at the same time, I think you told me you were home for like 2 weekends at most, at not home, but at your other home, even a month. That's unbelievable. So realistically, at least from what I knew from talking with you all the time, was that you were on the road all the time. So what was your goal over the past 12 months what were you trying to personally accomplish in the whatever 80 hours or 100 that you're spending?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it is kind of a 7-day-a-week job for most of the year. You do have a few breaks over the Christmas holiday, for example. It's not that crazy, but otherwise, as soon as things start up, like Buckeye was last weekend, so here we are, early February.
Darren, you were not sitting back during the Christmas vacation. Don't tell me that.
No, and that, and I'm energized, as you can hopefully tell. I mean, I love aviation, so to me, the AOPA platform is such a great platform to really get the message out and talk about all the things that are amazing about general aviation, not just to pilots, but to potential pilots, but also to communities. I was really, a lot of my energy was around trying to help people who didn't fly understand why general aviation mattered, what goes on at those airports that they may only see as a noise-making plot of land. And it's like, well, that's where the airline pilots and other pilots of the future are coming from. That's where the medevac flights depart from. That's where there's a volunteer pilot who's taking some young child to a nearby hospital, like an angel flight type of thing, or pilots in pause, or maybe it's disaster relief if you live in Florida and there's a hurricane that's come through. Those little airplanes that are bringing all the supplies, that goes to that little airport. So, so a big part of it was those things. And it's kind of 7 days a week. It is, but and in fairness to kind of everybody, it's one of those where there's no right answer where, hey, being in Frederick all the time is what you got to do. Well, no, that's not true, because you got to be out talking to members and donors. And in my case, a lot of these students who don't know who AOPA is, right? Young folks, 18, 19, 21 years old. I remember one very vividly. I was talking and said, hey, do you know who AOPA is? And they're like, no, I rent the airplane that I use, just down the street. It's like, well, no, you clearly don't know who AOPA is and what we do. That being said, there is real value to this role, the CEO being in Frederick, because you do have to spend time with the team and you do have to help coach and develop. And probably the biggest thing is getting alignment on priorities and making sure that the the leadership team is working together as one team, as opposed to a collection of silos, making sure there's a common set of goals. Most things that need to happen require them to happen across functional boundaries. Like, even as I mentioned, going more digital, we've got a magazine publications group which has amazing capabilities when it comes to picture taking. Like, AOPA has some of the best pictures in the world in their magazine. But those same pictures need to go out on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok and these other venues. And we have a social media team that's out there capturing stories that serve, entertain and educate the audience, in very short form, well structured stories. And they have to work well with the publications team. So those are two, what were historically two separate organizations, are now really working together as one to tell stories that capture and engage people's interest, in particular younger folks who may not know all of the opportunities that aviation provides, and do it in ways that it can show up in the magazine, but it can also show up on Instagram or any other platform. So, I think being in the office does matter. And so then it becomes the inherent balance of how much time do you spend in the office, because every minute in the office is a minute not out with members. And that's kind of why it becomes a 7-day-a-week job. Most of the office stuff is Monday through probably Wednesday and sometimes Thursday. But then as you get into Thursday, that's when you got to start heading somewhere, typically for maybe a donor meeting, and then you're going to do some press, and then you're going to be at the actual event that might be on a Saturday, pilot town hall or a Buckeye type of thing. And so it's all consuming, but it for me, obviously, was very energizing.
It seems to me that in a very short period of time, meaning the past 12 months, nearly every pilot I have talked to has met you in person. Like, that's mind-boggling to me. And you were everywhere. And the other part of it, I wonder, is some of it, of course, is getting people to see you and meeting the people there. How much did you look at the past 12 months as also essentially kind of gathering the information you need to determine and then implement a future strategy?
Yeah, a big part of that was just being in those forums to listen and hear. So I did 13 pilot town halls, so pretty much one a month. There was a couple months where it was 2, and then like the AirVenture was did a pilot town hall there, of course, and a lot of it was listening. Not surprisingly, by the 3rd or 4th or 5th one, you're hearing a lot of the same messages. But then I think equally important was them hearing from AOPA, and that was loud and clear. Like, by the 2nd or 3rd one I did, I was hearing consistently, "Wow, it's great to see AOPA. Like, we haven't seen AOPA in a while." And and I don't think there hadn't been as much of a focus in the more recent years on the pilot town hall format. And for me, it was absolutely an opportunity to share what we were doing, kind of pressure test ideas. I would tell, this is what we're going to go do. And I would listen, right, and see whether people like, yes, wow, if you could do that, that's amazing. Or, not sure that's all that compelling. And so for me, it was that. And I'm sure I did not meet every pilot, although it felt like I was meeting a lot. And I use I did a lot of United Airlines and other airlines, but United was the main one, traveling back and forth across the country. When I would go home on a weekend, that was pretty much always United, from BWI back to Redmond, Oregon. And I'd use every one of those to talk to the pilots, and are they AOPA members or not. I would sit next to people, and sometimes they would see my laptop open and see a picture of an airplane, and that would spark a conversation. And so I was kind of using every interaction as a chance to engage and talk about why general aviation mattered and why I was excited about it. And if they had even a little bit of interest, try to get them to see that it could be part of their life if they wanted it to be.
Well, it seems like one of the challenges, as you mentioned, we're talking more and more and more about social media interaction and things like that, but our pursuit is one in the real world. And so it's not no one succeeds by staying home and staying glued to their phone and just scrolling. Like, this is about getting out and learning how to fly, making the pilots of tomorrow, and buying airplanes and buying products and all the things that matter. What did you learn during that 12 months about kind of how to cross that divide?
Yeah, a lot of it was, I was intentionally trying to engage with, I'll call it the traditional members, of which there are many, to understand what they cared about. And by and large, the ones who are, AOPA members today, by and large, like AOPA a lot. That's why they're members today. And almost all of them would stand in line to come up and get a selfie with me and tell me, I've been a member for 42 years. My dad was a member and, signed me up when I was 13 years old. And now I've been a member for, 26 years or whatever. And so by and large, the member base today is incredibly happy and likes what AOPA is doing. There's of course folks who used to be AOPA members and they've left the fold, and I felt like that was an opportunity to win them back. Like, tell them this is not your grandfather's AOPA, and certainly it won't be over time. Like, it's becoming a different AOPA. But one of the things I guess disturbed me on the journey was how many young people I met who were very myopic in their view of what aviation was going to be to them. Most of them were on an airline journey. They were in one of these 141 schools. It was very cookie cutter. You march through, you get your CFI, you become a CFI, you do that for a year and a half, and then you get right seat on an airliner. And not that that's a bad path, but it was surprisingly narrow, their view of all the opportunities in aviation. So that's where I felt like, man, like AOPA's got to help those folks see that, look, not every one of them will become an airline pilot for a variety of reasons. The airlines will go bankrupt, or they'll furlough, or they may not be a good fit for the airlines that hiring at that time. But man, that's not a bad thing. There's cargo and medevac and fractionals, with NetJets and FlexJets and many others. But there's aerial firefighting, there's ag stuff. I mean, there's so many different ways to make a living in aviation that most of them had no idea how you'd get into that. And I was lucky. I stumbled across, and most things I just lived at airports. I'd ride my bike out there as a kid, and in that I stumbled into people who did all of these different things in aviation, and it's what led me to ultimately going to Alaska and being a bush pilot up there, or getting to fly for John Travolta, or getting into competition aerobatics, or whatever it was. All the different things I had opportunities to do were because I ran into somebody who did that, and it opened my eyes to how many different opportunities there were. So in my view, that was one of the biggest opportunities AOPA had, was to capture the people who have already raised their hands that I want to be in aviation. Let's help those individuals understand the full breadth of opportunity that aviation provides. And if they end up in an airliner, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But for those who don't, it's not the end of the world. There's so many other amazing opportunities out there.
Yeah. There also seems to be a little kind of awkward connection or disconnect over the years between the AOPA and the maintenance community to some degree.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned about opportunities, and it doesn't seem like it comes quick to the list of, I think, anyone at AOPA that's not just pilot, it's mechanic too, and all the other folks. Did you get any thoughts over the past year about that?
Yeah, a lot. I had every time someone would see me driving around the airport and notice that I was the guy who led AOPA, they would grab me, especially if it was a maintenance shop, and come over and say, "Can you please help?" I mean, the smaller maintenance shops in particular are really struggling to find mechanics, and the mechanics that do get created today often go straight to the airlines because they're losing mechanics too. And we have a problem, and pilots can't do what pilots do if they don't have mechanics to service the plane. Since that was absolutely something the leadership team was working towards. It's already in the AOPA high school program. AOPA's got a free high school program, 4 years, 32,000 kids in it, 1,500 schools, all 50 states. I mean, it's amazing program, and it's completely funded by donors who give generously to the AOPA Foundation to help support that program. And in that program, it talks about all the opportunities that aviation provides. So not just being a pilot, but it talks about air traffic control, talks about mechanics, talks about airport management. There's so many ways to have aviation be a part of your life. And it's by design, right? The intention of the high school program was to give kids a glimpse into a world that they probably don't know exists, and help them hopefully identify one that lights a spark and causes them to want to move in that path. And then in parallel, the foundation's got millions of dollars of scholarships. And so increasingly those scholarships are starting to be also made available to young kids who wanted to pursue a path down the maintenance path. Mm-hmm. And there's an opportunity to do substantially more. So that was absolutely part of the agenda this year, was to at least tee up, could AOPA, without losing focus on its core, which would be pilots and aircraft owners ultimately, could it also add in mechanics and then offer similar things? We have all the legal support, our legal services plan. And that basically, mechanics are signing logbooks every day and they're taking on a certain amount of legal risk. Why couldn't we offer the same protection to mechanics as AOPA offers to pilots? And that's not inconceivable. So, we kind of work through other things we could offer that would be helpful to them. And so, we'll have to see where the organization goes, but for sure, you're raising a really important point. Like, we need mechanics. AOPA's got the scale to help improve that.
Yeah. So you have your first year, you're out there and extraordinarily engaged, in my personal opinion, with things, and at the same time juggling, as you mentioned, changes in the industry as a whole, legislative work that has to be done to keep moving the ball forward on that front. A dynamic environment in terms of engagement and challenges with membership, and to be honest, a culture. I believe that every president brings a culture, and a culture that you're looking to change in a way that you see fit. I have to, ask the tougher part of this, even though we said in the beginning we're going to be careful. What can you tell us? What happened?
Oh, I can't honestly share too much. The good news is there's plenty of people out there who are, who are close to everything there, and that I think there's plenty of reporters out there chasing them down. Current employees, past employees, advisory board members, and so on. And so all I can say is, at the end of the day, the CEO reports to the board. That's a well-known fact, and that's true of every company. I had an agenda and was driving that, and I think the board wanted some things done differently, I think, and and that's their prerogative ultimately. So I would say I remain as committed to AOPA. I'm still a member, and I've not dropped that despite the actions of the last couple of weeks here. And I do think AOPA matters to the industry, and I think to GA. Frankly, I think General Aviation matters to the country. AOPA matters to General Aviation. And so I want nothing but the best for AOPA. And yes, the board and I had some I think challenges that led to this, but I don't want to go into any of the specifics around that. There'll be plenty of other folks are out there looking for that.
No worries. I respect that, and I appreciate your answer to that. I will ask, as someone who is a huge Darren Pleasance fan, you answer it however you want, but if anyone were to be able to find an opportunity in any way, this seems like an awfully brutal job, but you would you ever take it again?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd say it's the best job I've ever had, just because not everybody gets to take what they love doing and what they I think are reasonably good at, let's say, and have those two things come together. And so I don't regret. The last year has been amazing. I wouldn't change a thing. It's been an amazing journey. So if the opportunity ever presented itself, of course, but I also don't want to be presumptuous and assume that that's going to happen, but at all. In fact, I think we'll see where things go, but right now I'm looking forward and trying to be as supportive of AOPA as I can be. I think the team's amazing. This is a difficult time for them for sure. They didn't ask for the transition, so it's a challenge they're having to navigate. And obviously, there's a lot of upset people. You can see that in the social media, and I personally appreciate the support, but I do worry about AOPA, and I want to make sure people don't take it out on the employees there, because they're showing up every single day trying to help AOPA do what it does for the industry and deliver on the agenda that we put together.
I really appreciate that, and I want to remind everyone who's listening too here that our goal, whether it be from me, from Darren, from anyone else in the industry, we are huge AOPA supporters. Our goal is to see it go forward and thrive, and we just ask that everybody do understand, as I said in the beginning, that for legal and other reasons, there's only so much that we can say at this point, obviously. But I think what really does matter is to talk, even in a more general sense, and whether it be AOPA or other organizations within aviation, from what you've learned over the past year, what is it that you really think needs to start happening? And again, not even just at AOPA, but what needs to happen to make this transition to having organizations that do extremely important work in lobbying, in rights and protections and services and education, but be able to do it in this new world that may be non-contributory, where someone just goes and looks at things on TikTok or YouTube or something else and isn't contributing to the folks that have to go do the work to protect them.
Yeah, and that's a core part of what we were trying to wrestle through as well. How much can AOPA depend on, called a membership-based model, where people choose to write a check or give a credit card for $90 a year in order to participate in the services, and also support the advocacy? Because to your point, I do think it's one of the most important things that AOPA does is it shows up every single day, not just at the national level, but at the state and local level, to advocate for, basically, to partner with all the local pilots to help them navigate the challenges that show up, almost on a daily basis, of other stakeholder groups that are trying to either get rid of aviation or at least significantly constrain it. And for all of us who've traveled the world as much as I have, you get a real appreciation for how good we've got it here in this country compared to anywhere in Europe or certainly Asia. Asia's got almost nothing. Australia, New Zealand are about it. It's pretty much zero in Asia. And even if you go to Europe, the amount of fees and the constraints on being able to operate a plane and the access to airspace and all the crazy contortions you have to go through to fly there to get from A to B, given all the military airspace and constrained airspace for airliners. I mean, we have it so good in the U.S. and most people don't know. And so I think for that reason, they're not as compelled to want to contribute their dollars to help organizations like AOPA do the advocacy that allows us to keep what we've got. And so I think, it is a question. I know, does the revenue model have to change? Obviously, donors have made a huge impact on organizations, like AOPA, like EAA. I mean, there's a huge dependence on individuals with means who care deeply about aviation, who are willing to contribute their resources to help an organization they trust in to deliver a set of programs and things like advocacy that help the entire industry. And so I think, the donor model will continue to be a really important part of how these organizations, I think, survive. I'm hopeful that if the value proposition, if the thing you get when you write a check, if what you get is more tangible, as opposed to you belong because everybody belongs, I think that's how it's worked in the past. I think the younger generation, it's a little more transactional, unfortunately, but hey, I give you $89 a year, you give me something back that's worth way more than $89. I think that can work. That's how kind of most people buy things today. It's just we've not had to depend as much on that in the past. And so I think, a set of career services, like I mentioned earlier, like if I were a young person, I gave $89, and for that $89, AOPA could help me understand all of the ways I could make a living in aviation. And for each one, what are the different flavors? If you're doing cargo, there's different flavors of cargo, different kind of ways to do cargo or medevac. And then for each one of those, what's the lifestyle like? What's the typical salary structure like? How stable is that industry? What are the typical ways that people build time to get ready for that industry? What's the minimum qualifications to get into that industry? And so, and then ultimately, hey, if I wanted to talk to someone who is an aerial firefighter, how would I do that? I got lucky. I happened to live next to one, and that was how I did it, but not everybody does. But what if AOPA could help you talk to an actual bona fide aerial firefighter and get their direct guidance on how might you get into that? Those are all things I think AOPA could do. That's the path we had headed down, or we're heading down, and I suspect still are heading down. I don't think it's changed that much in the last 2 weeks. So, that would be something where it's a very clear exchange of value. And if the value is high enough, then the $89 is cheap. People are buying ForeFlight and other products out there because the value exchange is worth it. I just think AOPA and other membership organizations have to evolve their model to that reality.
Yeah, it seems some of it is new, maybe new value or new products or new things for that, but a lot of it is communication. EA, for example, is unique. They've got Oshkosh, they've got the AirVenture event, and that's a whole different kind of thing. But I'm really glad that you brought up the state level, because if we really look at some of the most important things that AOPA has accomplished recently, you talk about airports that didn't close, advocacy that happened to protect those airports or to protect rights or rules at those airports, ADSB billing and things that people are trying to do right now that do that, transparency with FBO fees, and advocating for public airports to have places where people can park for free, which, man, talk about something I think that would impact the industry, right? The idea that you go to a public airport and you have no choice but ramp fees from all these big guys with jets, and that there isn't even a few spots that you can just pull into and walk away. It just seems that AOPA does this work, and if that's really communicated of look at everything we've done for you in your hometown, oh man, isn't that worth the $89 right there?
Yeah, and that's where the social media gets back, because historically those wins would be a side article somewhere in the magazine, and if you happen to flip and stop and read that, you would get an appreciation.
And I've seen that, but that's hard to get to, right? I've seen that, like what happened in your region. That I'll be honest, that's not enough. That's not enough credit.
It's not enough, and hopefully
it's almost an insult to the people who put so much work into making it happen, and that all they got was this little tiny thing, and it doesn't do the justice.
Well, and it's a heroic team, and there's a whole airports team that basically are sitting in each of the regions,
Yeah,
And the amount
airport
of
support network. Yeah.
well, that's it. We have about over 2,000. I say we. AOPA has over 2,000 airport support network volunteers, and so those are, and there's something 5,000 airports basically in the country, and so roughly half have at least one airport support network volunteer, and then they're supported by AOPA employees that sit in each region that are kind of help mobilize them and support them and educate them. And if there's a city council meeting, they go to those city council meetings with them. And those are hard because they're bad. Pick an airport like Florida, just a state like Florida. I mean, there's hundreds of airports, and Stacy, who runs that group, it's not just Florida, it's multiple states, and she's kind of out there helping to work with these ASNs to really support the pilots in the area and to advocate in front of city councils and mayors and other organizations, airport commissions, and so on about why something they might be proposing, whether it's landing fees, using an ADS-B to collect those, or changes in airspace, implementation of a Class Charlie, whatever it might be. They advocate for pilots in the area. So that happens every single day. And to your point, most people don't know about it. And that's where social media comes in, though, because there really is a chance to take these wins, tell those stories through social media, so more people understand that here was something bad that almost happened, and it didn't happen, not just because of AOPA. AOPA is really kind of the catalyst in a sense, but it is the ASNs, and then it's the local pilot groups. AOPA can't do the local stuff on its own. It needs the local pilot groups, but it's the energy that can help bring that together in a coordinated way, and it results in typically really good outcomes.
Yeah, you mentioned the transactional nature of kind of where things are going, especially with a younger demographic, and it seems like there's also an opportunity there, because when you talk about something like the protecting airports, the idea that when something is happening, there is a number you can call, and people will help you, and that's what AOPA is doing is really, really important. I wonder, either it exists and isn't well communicated, or if it's also an opportunity to do the same thing at the individual level, because I've seen so many new pilots and students and all sorts of other things that have a problem trying to get their flight examiner booked, trying to find someone to do certain things, trying to deal with problems, transactional issues that students, pilots, and mechanics, as you mentioned, have. And and we know we do this today with the pilot protection program with AOPA. But if people have a number that they can call and know, this is why you pay. You pay because when you have a problem, we're here for you. I have a my flight instructor won't do this, my mechanic won't sign this off, whatever it is, or I can't book an examiner, or this happened to me. Isn't that sort of kind of what AOPA has the flavor and responsibility of?
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I noticed when I first got there, is a lot of what AOPA provides is kind of the best kept secret in the industry. I didn't know, right? And I was coming in to become CEO and president, and within the first couple of weeks, like, wow, I didn't know we did that. I didn't know we did that. So yeah, the Pilot Information Center, PIC, help people with just about every conceivable question you'd have, whether, can I log time if I do this, or how do I fly to the Bahamas, or what's it like to cross the border to Canada, or, I'm thinking about buying this kind of plane, what should I be thinking about, and so on. I mean, it just goes on, and on virtually every question you could possibly ask. There's an expert at AOPA that can help you with that, that's answered that same question probably 30, if not more times. And then all the medical stuff you mentioned. Hey, I had anxiety or depression growing up as a teenager, and I want to become an airline pilot. Can I? Right? I was on these meds. I either am or I'm not anymore. I'm under this counseling. Over like 30% of calls coming into AOPA were for people under 30 years old. And I was shocked when I learned that. I thought it would all be people in their 60s and 70s and 80s with heart or blood pressure issues or whatever. And no, a lot of them are young folks trying to figure out if aviation is for them and could they make it work. And reality with the right guidance, and like, hey, you need to answer these questions. This is what the FAA is going to need to see. We can help you get your application ready before you go to your AME. And by the way, if you've already got a third class medical, maybe you just go to basic med if you don't want to be a pilot for a living. I was blown away as I would shadow those calls at the level of expertise that AOPA would bring to bear. So yeah, I think that is an important role for organizations like AOPA to play. And I think to your point on communication, that's the gap, is most people don't know. And that's kind of shame on AOPA, and that's what they're working on, right? They're fixing that. They're changing how they communicate in ways that help more people appreciate the breadth of services, and then also calibrating, how well used are these services. Maybe there's things they provide that really aren't adding value, and if that's the case, that was part of what we were working on, is let's get rid of things that people don't care that much about, because that's consuming resources and mind share, and let's divert those resources and effort into stuff that people do care about.
Yeah, or well, certainly, or communicate better first, because I always hesitate when something looks at being kind of cut in that
For
regard.
sure.
I feel that there's when magazine readership drop and you have this generational change, I feel as if that's how that got lost, and people started saying, oh well, it's on a forum, or it's on TikTok, or it's on YouTube, and that's my resource. And it's not, because AOPA seems to offer, and I think should offer, both levels of that. One, a real resource with educated, correct answers to what you need that you can trust, along with the insurance side if something goes bad, and which is like the pilot protection program or something.
Yeah, medical and the legal stuff is exactly it.
You need real answers, and there's a lot of bad information out there.
I think that was definitely what we wanted to kind of trade on, was authenticity and accuracy. And because there's no shortage of stuff out on the internet, you can find answers to just about every question, but then, you know, sometimes you get 3 or 4 answers to the same question. You're like, well, which one do I believe? And I think the concept was, look, AOPA has been around a long time, and we're deep on every one of these topics. And if we could just use technology more effectively to get the well-researched, you know, well-proven answer out in front of a pilot, so that they don't waste time trying to sort through that on their own. And that's all kind of one-stop shop. You pay your $89 and you get all that. And so, yeah, that was exactly where it was. Just make sure ultimately the AOPA is still relevant. It's got to change how it communicates. It's got to tune some of what it offers so it's more relevant for the younger demographic. And then, yeah, they sort of trade on trust and on accuracy in terms of the information that it provides, educational content that it provides, and hopefully inspirational content too. A lot of what AOPA was trying to do is, you know, increasingly bring to life the excitement of general aviation, right? It is super exciting, all the stuff you can do with it, and a lot of people don't have visibility into that. So, you know, AOPA is a platform, I think, to do more of that.
True. You know, I think I focus so much on the other side of it, because I look at it and I say, this is your life when it comes to your safety, and this is legality when it comes to your well-being in every other way, and your freedom and your privileges. And getting that information correct from a reputable source, that's not something you want to just trust someone's opinion who says they know what they're talking about. That's a really, really big deal.
Yeah, I think so. And that's why I was excited to join the organization and try to help it, right, as it needs to evolve into the next, you know, multiple decades of relevance and value in general aviation.
What about the industry itself and working with the industry? It seems to me that that's been another area that, if we look back decades, I'm not pointing to any particular president, just look back decades, that AOPA has sort of gone in all sorts of different directions. Or are we just looking at them as advertisers in the industry? Are we looking at them as partners? Are we competing sometimes with them ourselves? It seems to me that we're missing a little bit with many organizations, not even just AOPA, this kind of a rising tide raises all ships attitude, where we want to help support every company, whether they're a big avionics company, a little startup, a software company, a new product, whatever it is. We actually want everyone to flourish. What are your thoughts about how things should work moving forward to better partner with the industry?
I think your rising tide floats all boats is exactly the right thing. It's too small an industry for organizations to compete, and I would, you know, give huge credit, you know, to Mark and to Jack Pelton over at EAA and Mark Baker at AOPA. You know, it wasn't always the case that those two organizations worked well together. They were quite competitive at one time. And today I can say there's never been a stronger relationship. You know, I was on the board of EAA for a long time. Jack Pelton's a great guy and did a lot for EAA, and has, you know, created the largest, you know, I'd say most inspiring aviation event in the world.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so, you know, and the same would be true of the MBAA, of Gamma, you know, the Alphabet. There's NADA, Kurt Castagna and the team. You know, we are meeting. VAI is another one. There's these alphabet groups, and we meet together on a regular basis to talk about the issues and make sure that those different organizations come together with one voice, because it's so much stronger together. And at the margin, there might be some areas of disagreement, and we work those out together. But at the end of the day, it's, you know, call it 90, 95% how do we stack hands and help more get done on behalf of General Aviation all up, rather than fight for our own little slice of the pie. And I think it's actually working really well right now. I hope nothing changes in that regard.
I think it's working really well in terms of between organizations. I still think every one of those organizations is somewhere at a different point on the spectrum when you talk about the commercial companies, whether, again, everything from startups to the biggest companies, General Aviation, they're all somewhere on the spectrum of what can I do for you and what can you do for me, as two different ends of the spectrum. And it seems like there's an opportunity there, certainly for AOPA and also for others, to be more of a help to and welcoming to the startups who aren't ready to just throw money at advertising or be there for AOPA, but instead the other way around. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's through Advocacy or other, we do all these, if it's an aircraft company, of course, AOPA goes out and flies airplanes and talks about it and tries to highlight the latest innovations coming out and give some of these small companies that might not have giant advertising platforms visibility that they might not otherwise get. So I think that's an obligation of organizations like AOPA and EAA and others to use their scale to help innovators in the industry in particular, to help others know about what it is they've brought to market and help them be successful. So it's not just about the advertising dollars. It's not always just a commercial relationship. I think there's an obligation to use the scale and the brand, to your point earlier, the trust that an organization that's got the scale of AOPA has to help new entrants into the market. And then also the legacy folks who are out there that have been around forever, the engine companies, a lot of the avionics companies, help individuals understand the breadth of options that are out there, because sometimes you end up with an 800-pound gorilla who's really kind of dominating the industry, and it makes it really difficult for these secondary and tertiary players to get even a fair shot at telling their story and getting awareness among the population. And so I think AOPA and others play a role in helping to make sure that you don't end up with just a very small number of very large players who ultimately end up dominating the market. I think at the expense of innovation, at the expense of the members themselves or the pilots themselves.
Well, I think obviously it's an investment in the future, not just in the individuals that are members, but when you help out a startup of some kind, they know that they realize AOPA helped get us going, or EAA or any other organization. Yep. And that turns into a very, very loyal supporter if they grow and flourish and end up becoming advertisers or end up becoming someone who supports it through donations or something like that. It's important, and I think not viewing folks as competitors, but having that approach of a rising tide. I mean, we all have the same mission. I have the same mission here. We said at the beginning of the show, I've got the same mission here at SocialFlight, right? Our goal is to get people flying, get people out there, deliver education, do whatever. We don't view that as competitive with anyone. It is just trying to do the right thing, and we all want to help. We all want to support each other.
Yep, no, absolutely, 100%.
Well, Darren, we have run out of time, but I want to thank you so much. This has been so enlightening. And I from a very personal perspective, I can't imagine AOPA under better leadership as it's been over the past 12 months. And I really do hope that there's an opportunity in the future, whether it's at AOPA or whether it's that you land somewhere else. I think you bring something truly, truly wonderful to the industry. And I'm really looking forward to your next chapter, of which I have to ask you my last question, which is from this book, which I love. So you wrote this book, True North, A Handbook of Inspired Living. How important have the lessons inside this book been to you over the past 2 weeks?
Oh, incredible. Yeah, that book has, I wrote it because the lessons in there had carried me through a pretty interesting and an inspiring life. And so that's kind of really what drove me to write the book. And then I've had, we didn't talk, but I've had other things in the past, where I have color vision issues, and that kind of shot me down for becoming an airline pilot, and that crushed me at the time, right? And but yet it opened up all these other doors that resulted in me getting into what I'm doing, what I was doing up until 2 weeks ago, and and there will be the next thing. So and the book is really good at that. I've had, I think if every problem's an opportunity. That's proven itself over and over and over again. And so I'm as curious and interested to see what's next as anybody else would be. I don't know what it'll be. I'm sure it will be interesting. I love general aviation, and so I don't imagine a world where I find myself, drifting back into high tech or something else. I kind of feel like that was an amazing part of my life, but I've checked that box. And now I'm in a position where I have the opportunity to come back and, do something for an industry I care a lot about. And so what that will look like, I actually don't have any idea. I've had a lot of people reach out to me already, and I'm not going to do anything too quickly here. I want to see how things evolve for me over the coming months here, and see where I land. But I'd be surprised if it wasn't in general aviation. I care a lot about it.
I love it. Well, if I'm buying stock in you, Darren. So I really appreciate
that.
I'm
appreciate
grateful again for you taking the time to join us here on SocialFlight Live, for your support of SocialFlight and everything that we do, and I really cherish your friendship and everything that you're doing to support general aviation.
Well, Jeff, thanks for having me on the show. For one, I appreciate it. It's a year after the first time we did this, and every bit as much fun. And I hope for folks listening in, they take advantage of what you do with SocialFlight and help people get out and enjoy the amazing excitement that aviation provides. So yeah, thanks for being willing to let me be on your show. I appreciate it.
I'm thrilled. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again.
Thanks so much.
And thanks to all of you for joining us here on SocialFlight Live. We'll be back next Tuesday, February 24th, with Colonel Eileen Collins, decorated United States Air Force veteran, the first female shuttle commander and the commander of the return to flight mission after the Columbia disaster. That's here on SocialFlight Live. And again, it is next Tuesday, February 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'd just like to thank all of you for everything that you're doing to support general aviation, especially if any of you that are doing efforts that help support what's happening at the moment with the transition to AOPA. And Darren, obviously, I'm biased as a friend of his and someone that I truly do respect. And so I appreciate your efforts in that regard as well. And thanks for taking the time just to hear this story tonight. And so with that, thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all blue skies.